Picture this. You are standing in a cavernous, super drafty vault. It's the war room at Harrenhal.
Oh, wow. Yeah, and the air in there is just incredibly heavy.
It smells of damp stone, old ash, and, that really distinct metallic tang of blood.
Yeah, a real grim setting.
Exactly. And outside these high arched windows, rain is just pounding down in relentless sheets, basically turning the entire courtyard into a swamp of black mud.
Right.
And huddled around this massive oak table, which is illuminated by just the flickering amber glow of these tallow candles, are three figures.
And it's a really tense room.
Yeah.
Because you have Lord Tywin Lannister, right, standing completely rigid, eyes fixed on a map like a predator looking for a weak point.
Yeah, just typical Tywin.
Exactly. And then you have Tyrion Lannister shifting uncomfortably on a stool, nursing a cup of sour red wine.
Right.
And then there's this third figure, this unnamed, just brilliant strategist, quietly holding a charcoal stick and a brass scale.
So in this deep dive, we are going on a mission into a completely reimagined version of a classic fantasy war scenario.
Yeah, because we aren't looking at dragons today.
Definitely not. No magic swords, and we are, definitely not looking at heroic cavalry charges.
No, the crisis the characters are facing in that damp room is going to be solved entirely through ruthless, real-world macroeconomics and supply chain logistics.
Which is just so cool. I mean, it is a profound paradigm shift from how we usually consume these kinds of stories.
It really is.
Yeah.
And the immediate threat they're facing is basically existential.
Right, because they are fighting a massive war on three different fronts.
But they only have the treasury to support one.
Exactly. So Robb Stark has bypassed Tywin's host entirely and is just bleeding the Western forces dry.
Yeah, and down south, Stannis Baratheon is refitting a massive fleet for an amphibious assault directly on the capital.
And to top it all off, the Lannister sellswords, those mercenaries who are basically the only thing keeping them alive, are exactly 14 days away from realizing the crown is completely broke.
14 days. That's literally a ticking clock.
14 days until a bloody mutiny.
Right. If those mercenaries don't get paid, they turn their swords on their employers.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the very first conceptual shift the strategist introduces here is just fascinating.
Oh, absolutely. Because Tywin, being Tywin, stubbornly insists they aren't broke.
Right. He says the gold in Casterly Rock isn't exhausted, so, they'll just pay the men.
But the strategist points out this fatal flaw in that whole feudal way of thinking. The physical gold sitting in a vault hundreds of miles away is completely irrelevant.
Irrelevant because the trade routes are severed.
Exactly. The geography is working completely against them.
Right.
Robb Stark's outriders currently control the Red Fork.
Right.
So if you try to move a gold train from the vaults of Lannisport to the war room at Harrenhal, you are essentially loading up wagons of bullion and driving them straight through hostile territory.
So you aren't paying your men, you're just organizing a very convenient delivery of, 40,000 gold dragons directly to the Northern Rebellion.
Right. The strategist tells Tywin a terrifying truth here. A resource that cannot be transported does not actually exist.
It is a mathematical zero.
Yes, a mathematical zero. And simply retreating your army back to the west to secure those supply lines.
That is also a mathematical zero.
Exactly, because the moment the Lannister army leaves the field to go guard a gold train, Stannis sails in, takes the capital.
Joffrey's head goes on a spike.
Yep, and the war is structurally over. The lords of Westeros just won't follow a king without a throne, and the Iron Bank will instantly recognize Stannis just to secure their own debts.
So they're completely trapped. Retreat is political failure, and staying means financial starvation.
Right, so what do you do?
Well, before you can fight a battle, you have to feed your men.
Always.
So the narrative logically moves from the realization that their gold is completely useless to finding a new alternative currency just to survive the immediate localized threat of Robb Stark's army.
And this brings us to the logistics of the beast. Because the strategist forces Tywin to stop thinking like a feudal lord obsessed with honor and start thinking like a Braavosi factor.
And for anyone listening who might not know the lore, a factor is basically a medieval venture capitalist, right?
Yeah, exactly. A mercantile agent who manages massive assets and trade across borders.
Right.
And in a wartime economy, plagued by hyperinflation and supply chain disruption, gold actually depreciates in practical value.
Because you can't eat it.
Exactly. You can't eat gold.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, physical commodities appreciate wildly. You literally have to redefine your currency.
Right, and the commodity they pivot to is actually born out of a massive mistake.
Oh, this is my favorite part. Sir Gregor Clegane the Mountain has been just ruthlessly burning the Riverland's crops.
Which, on a basic level, denies food to the enemy.
Sure, but it also completely destroys the Lannisters' own tax base. You can't tax a pile of ash.
No, you can't. But here is the critical oversight. Clegane burned the fields, but he missed the salt pans.
Right, the town of salt pans and the coastal salt mines.
And in Westeros, salt isn't just a seasoning to make your dinner taste better.
No, it is the single most critical preservation agent that exists. Without it, meat rots in a week.
So are we basically talking about weaponizing a biological reality?
Basically, yeah.
Because it feels like a modern superpower cutting off the global supply of semiconductors to cripple an enemy's tech industry, but, with medieval food supplies.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. Salt is the semiconductor of this medieval supply chain.
Wow.
I mean, think about the sheer scale of the problem Robb Stark is facing here. He has 20,000 northern boys in his army.
Right.
These are soldiers who are used to heavily salted pork and dried fish. His supply lines stretch hundreds of miles back to the north, and he just cannot forage fresh meat indefinitely in a scorched landscape.
So the strategist proposes seizing the salt pans immediately with a disciplined garrison.
Yes. Not raiders who would destroy the infrastructure, but soldiers who will hold the means of production.
And then they declare a crown monopoly on all salt distribution south of the neck.
And they set up this brutal tier pricing system.
Yeah, allies get it at cost. Neutrals get hit with a 300% markup.
300%.
Yeah. And enemies, specifically Robb Stark's army, are completely embargoed.
And this is where that biological reality kicks in really hard. Within 3 weeks, Stark's army will be forced to eat fresh, unpreserved forage.
Which is terrible.
In a wet Riverland summer. Yeah. Eating rotting forage guarantees widespread outbreaks of camp fever, dysentery, and botulism.
And the text notes that for every 5 men Stark loses to a Lannister sore in open battle, he will lose 15 to the absolute biological reality of spoiled meat.
Right. They don't need to defeat his cavalry in the field. They just have to wait for his own rations to poison his infantry.
Hold on, though. If you're listening to this and wondering how you enforce a 300% markup on salt across half a continent without an army of medieval IRS agents, it seems kind of impossible.
It does seem impossible.
And Tywin even points out a major snag here, Walder Frey.
Oh, Walder Frey.
Right. He controls the Twins, the crucial river crossing, and Frey is notoriously greedy and paranoid. He's not going to just let the Lannisters control the lucrative salt routes through his territory without demanding a massive bribe in physical gold.
Yeah, you're touching on the friction of executing a monopoly here.
Yeah.
You don't police the roads. You police the source.
Right.
The strategist knows old Walder Frey only cares about tolls. Currently, Frey charges a 10% transit fee on physical goods crossing the Green Fork.
So what's the move?
The genius move is offering Frey a 5% cut of the global salt revenue in exchange for closing the crossing to northern supply wagons heading south.
But wait, why would a guy who wants gold in his hand today accept a percentage of an invisible future revenue stream?
Because the Lannisters are guaranteeing the volume. They're telling him, look, we control the monopoly, we set the price, and you get a cut entire kingdom's demand. Totally risk-free.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you don't have to inspect wagons or haggle. You just have to keep your gate closed to the Starks.
Which costs the Lannisters absolutely nothing because the revenue stream is completely manufactured by their own monopoly.
Exactly. It's pure profit for Frey, zero actual gold leaving the Lannister vault, and it forces Robb Stark into a corner.
Because he either has to attack his own ally at the Twins to force a crossing, or watch his army's diet get reduced to rotten turnips.
It is just a slow, methodical, logistical strangulation.
But while the salt embargo is slowly choking the northern threat over a matter of weeks, there is a much faster, much more violent threat sailing directly for the capital right now.
Yes. The Southern Theater.
So they have to instantly pivot from slow starvation tactics to immediate, desperate capital defense.
Right. Stannis Baratheon is a rigid commander who follows established military doctrine. He's sailing 70 war galleys into the mouths of the Blackwater Rush to assault the city.
And King's Landing is in dire straits.
Completely. The late King Robert left the crown 6 million dragons in debt, mostly to Tywin himself.
6 million dragons.
Yeah, the treasury is literally described in the source as having nothing but cobwebs and 3 eyebrowed rats.
So the capital constraint is very real, and the solution they come up with involves the alchemists.
Yes, the pyromancers.
Right. They have all this wildfire, this highly volatile, unstable, green explosive stored under the city. And historically, it's a massive liability.
Huge. One stray spark, and the capital is a crater.
Exactly. And Tywin naturally assumes they want to launch it at the ships using catapults.
But the strategist points out that wildfire is completely unpredictable in open water with shifting winds.
Right.
So instead of using it as a dangerous projectile, they treat it as a fixed defensive barrier.
What's fascinating here is the synergy of geography and chemistry.
Oh, it's staggering. They take old, rotten Hulk ships that aren't even seaworthy anymore, load them with thousands of jars of wildfire, and paint them to look like slow-moving grain transports. Very. And when Stannis' vanguard enters the narrow mouth of the river, they float these fire ships down with the current straight into the teeth of the invasion force.
And once the ships are in the middle of Stannis' fleet, they raise a massive, heavy iron chain across the river behind them.
Right, because the narrow geography of the Blackwater Rush naturally compresses the attacking fleet. They have no room to maneuver laterally.
So they're trapped.
Completely trapped. When those fire ships detonate, the wildfire spreads across the water's surface. Wildfire floats, it cannot be extinguished by water, so the river itself becomes a literal furnace.
And that chain ensures that the velocity of their retreat is zero.
Exactly. Stannis' entire tactical advantage, his superior numbers, his veteran seamanship, is instantly neutralized by physical bottlenecks and chemical properties.
Okay, let me stop you there. Here's where it gets really interesting. Because forging a massive river-spanning iron chain requires immense amounts of raw iron, roaring furnaces, and intense back-breaking labor.
Right, it's a huge industrial project.
So how do you pay starving blacksmiths in Flea Bottom to work around the clock when the treasury is full of rats?
That is the problem.
I mean, telling a bunch of heavy-muscled guys with hammers that they get an IOU sounds like a guaranteed recipe for a massive peasant revolt.
Well, you've hit the absolute crux of the capital constraint. You can't just bully them. There are too many, and like you said, they have hammers.
Right.
But you also cannot pay them in gold you do not possess. The economic brilliance of the solution is that the blacksmiths are paid in tax credits.
Wait, tax credits in a medieval fantasy setting?
Yes. Specifically, any blacksmith who works on the chain gets a 3-year exemption from the Crown's iron tariff.
Wow.
And faced with the alternative of execution for treason during a state of emergency, they accept the deal.
So it costs the Treasury absolutely zero gold today, right when they are most vulnerable, and it defers the cost to a stabilized future fiscal year.
Classic debt restructuring.
But I have to push back on the reality of that, though. If I'm a blacksmith in a slum, my kids are starving today. A piece of parchment with a wax seal saying, I don't pay a tariff 3 years from now doesn't buy bread tonight. Do they eat the paper? How does this actually work on the ground without a riot?
Because that tax credit is transferable. Yeah. The blacksmith takes that royal IOU, stamped with the Lannister seal, and walks into a local bakery. He trades a 3-year iron tariff exemption for a month's worth of bread.
And the baker just accepts that.
The baker accepts it because the baker owes taxes to the local grain merchant, who owes massive tariffs at the port.
That makes so much sense.
Right. That piece of paper flows all the way up the supply chain to the mercantile class, who actually pay heavy import taxes. They essentially spun up a secondary financial market in the middle of a medieval slum.
They invented fiat currency out of pure desperation.
Exactly. They converted old ships, raw chemistry, and future promises into a force multiplier that replaces 20,000 infantrymen they simply do not have.
It's just mind-blowing. But, defending the capital is really just survival.
Right. You still have to win the war.
To actually win the war, to crush whatever is left of Stannis' forces, they need a vanguard army.
They do.
And that forces the strategists to look south to the uncommitted 60,000 troops of Highgarden. They have to figure out how to launch a corporate buyout of a massive military force with absolutely zero liquid capital.
And this is where we see a massive macroeconomic shift. Renly Baratheon, who the Tyrells of Highgarden originally backed, closed the Rose Road to starve King's Landing.
Which tactically a siege makes sense.
Tactically, yes. Economically, it backfired disastrously on his own allies.
How so?
Well, the Reach is an agricultural powerhouse. But suddenly, the merchants of the Reach cannot sell their immense agricultural yield to the 500,000 consumers in the capital.
Oh, right. Because the road is closed.
Exactly. Grain is just sitting there rotting in silos, and the Tyrell lords are losing roughly 12,000 gold dragons every single week the siege continues.
So what does this all mean? This isn't a political alliance anymore. This is a hostile corporate takeover disguised as a royal wedding.
Basically, yeah.
The strategist literally says Sansa Stark, who is currently betrothed to King Joffrey, has no financial or military value. She is a political luxury we can no longer afford.
Ouch.
Right. They dump her as an asset and bring in Marguerite Tyrell as the new prime asset to secure the merger.
The pitch they send to Mace Tyrell is an absolute masterclass in leveraging a desperate market.
What do they offer him?
They don't offer him empty promises of glory or songs. They offer a highly specific trade proposal. Joffrey's hand in marriage to his daughter, a permanent 10-year grain monopoly supplying the capital, a guaranteed minimum price floor backed by the iron mines of Casterly Rock, and they make Mace Tyrell the master of coin.
Let's focus on that price floor. Why is that the kicker?
Because a price floor guarantees the Tyrells a return on their agricultural investment regardless of how much the harvest yields fluctuate. The Lannisters are absorbing the market risk.
And making Mace the master of coin.
That plays perfectly into his immense vanity and historically low intellect.
Ah, of course.
Tywin asks why the Tyrells would break their sworn oaths to Renly. And we connect this to the bigger picture. The strategist's answer is chillingly accurate. Oaths sworn to a king do not survive a major macroeconomic shift.
The Lannisters successfully outsourced their entire military expenditure to the wealthiest house in the realm, and they used Mace Tyrell's own vanity as the interest rate.
It is brilliant.
By giving him a fancy title and a price floor, they bought an army of 60,000 men for nothing.
Nothing but promises and ledgers.
Okay, let's fast forward 3 months in the text. The transition from the theoretical war room to the physical aftermath is wild.
It really is a completely different scene.
Yeah, the damp, blood-scented war room at Harrenhal is gone. Now we are in the Tower of the Hand in King's Landing, and the source text describes the room smelling like lemon oil and beeswax instead of blood and ash.
The strategy executed flawlessly.
Completely, Stannis is burned. The Tyrells marched up the Rose Road to save their investment, and Robb Stark's sick, starving, botulism-riddled army is retreating in the rain to negotiate with hostile Freys.
We are looking at the brutal efficiency of global financial markets responding to competent management.
And there is this hilarious telling detail from the text about the cultural impact of all this economics. Remember those starving blacksmiths in Flea Bottom who built the chain?
How could I forget?
They are so thrilled with how their tariff exemptions traded on the secondary market that they are treating the concept of tax credits like a literal new god from the Associ ledger books.
Well, that is amazing.
Yeah, they aren't even throwing garbage at Tyrion's carriage anymore.
Because economic stability trickles down in ways that swords and banners never do. When people can feed their families because the ledger balances, they stop rioting.
And this brings us to the ultimate validation of the strategist's grand plan. An envoy from the Iron Bank arrives at the capital.
Right.
The Iron Bank, the most feared financial institution in the world. And they offer to defer the crown's interest payments for 24 months, and they extend a new line of credit for 40,000 gold dragons just to rebuild the city's harbor.
Which sounds crazy at first.
Right. If you're listening to this, you have to be wondering, why would the most ruthless bank in the world lend more money to a crown that just survived by the absolute skin of its teeth?
This raises the most important question about how power actually functions in this world. The text's core philosophy is revealed right here.
Okay, lay it on us.
The Iron Bank does not care about the bravery of knights. They do not care about the divine rights of kings or ancient bloodlines or who sits on an uncomfortable iron chair. They care about one thing: predictability.
Predictability means steady interest payment.
Exactly. Wars are volatile. Markets hate volatility.
The crown proved it could stabilize a collapsing currency, secure vital supply lines through the salt monopoly, and manage massive structural deficits efficiently, rather than relying on brute force.
Yep. The bank is looking at that ledger, and they're investing in their management, not their crown. They see a team that understands supply and demand.
But the war isn't technically over. Tywin Nate's the realm is still fractured. The North is still out there holding territory.
True. But the strategist counters with the ultimate thesis of this whole text. They say, a fractured realm is simply an unorganized market.
It's a staggering way to view a continent, not as a battlefield, but as a market inefficiency.
And by maintaining those winter trade quotas, keeping the salt embargo in place through the freezing months, the North will literally be starved into submission without a single Lannister soldier ever having to march past the neck.
The climate and the lack of preservatives will do the fighting for them.
Let the lords have their glory, their tourneys, and their songs. While they're cheering for the crown, the ones who really win the game are the ones who own the ledger.
This deep dive completely flips the script on how we view conflict, both in fiction and in reality.
It really does.
Think about the conflicts or massive projects in your own life right now. Are you exhausting yourself trying to fight battles with swords when you don't have to?
Right. Maybe you should be looking for your own salt pans and ledgers.
Exactly. What is the unorganized market you are trying to conquer, and how can you leverage the logistics instead of just swinging a heavier weapon at the problem?
It's always about finding the structural vulnerabilities rather than attacking the strongest point of resistance.
But it also leaves us with something deeper to chew on as we wrap up.
Oh, for sure.
If a fractured realm is just an unorganized market, what happens when a monopolized market becomes too efficient?
Yeah.
Does the ledger eventually become a heavier, more oppressive crown than the one made of gold? And does that inevitably invite a completely different kind of rebellion, one fought not with armies on an open field, but with black markets, counterfeiters, and smugglers?
The market always finds a way to organize its own resistance.
Something to think about the next time you're looking at your own spreadsheets. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.